I'd like to welcome everybody to the Bay County Wastewater Plant. My name is Ryan Goebel. I'm the director here at the Bay County Department of Water and Sewer. We're happy to welcome you to our UV dedication ceremony. If you're wondering, what is this? Why are we here? Well, we're pretty happy to show off our system. We recently had a UV disinfection system installed, and that took place of our chlorine system. So we were able to get chlorine off-site, made not only our site safer, but our community safer. We're excited to show off that system. We're going to say a few words, and then we're going to walk over there and explain how all that works. Before we get going, if anybody gets thirsty, there's some bottles of water. Those were bottled at our sister plant, the Bay Area Water Plant. So it is bottled tap water from our other plant. So when you think about wastewater, I think it's fair to say that we normally don't have a lot of big news that we get to share. Wastewater treatment kind of works in the background of a community. I think it's fair that the average person, as long as the toilet flushes, as long as water goes down the drain, they don't think about what happens next. But if you actually take a tour of this plant, you find that it's pretty interesting what it takes to clean up the water. We do give tours to the public. We give tours to students. And almost every time when they get done with the tour, people say, "Man, that's impressive. I didn't know that it took this much to clean up the wastewater." To hear that. I don't think people realize how big of a part microorganisms play in our treatment. This is a biological plant. It gets to a point where the microorganisms actually break down the organics and the nutrients in the water. Without microorganisms, this plant wouldn't be able to clean the water like it does. The thing of that is those can be harmful to humans, so we have to disinfect the water before it leaves. The plant opened up in 1980. At that time, chlorine gas was the disinfectant. It was the most popular disinfectant in the 80s for a reason. It works. The problem is that it's dangerous. This plant is a medium-sized plant. We treat the wastewater from around 36,000 residents. We average on an average day, we treat the wastewater from about 6 million gallons, a little bit more than 6 million gallons a day. That's a lot of water to disinfect. I looked back, and in the last year we fed chlorine, we had to feed 30,000 pounds of chlorine gas to disinfect all that water. When we had chlorine on site, they came in ton cylinders. If we would have had a release from those chlorine cylinders, it could have been catastrophic, not just to our staff, but to our community. So we're all very happy that the chlorine is gone. We started planning our UV disinfection system in 2021. At that time, our chlorine system was starting to age. There were some components that needed to be upgraded, and the discussion was, do we need to look at a different form of disinfection? We decided UV was the way to go. The number one reason was safety. As we worked towards the design and implementation of UV, though, another reason started to formulate, and that was cost. In the last 5 years that we fed chlorine, we saw the price of chlorine gas rise by more than 400%. So chlorine gas went up, or it quadrupled in price in 5 years. By the time that we had UV installed, we found that it was actually more cost effective on a yearly basis to feed or to use UV as a disinfection as opposed to chlorine. So the cost just confirmed that we were making the right decision. UV was the way to go. I'm going to hand it off to Alan to show, but before I do, I want to thank a few people. First and foremost, you can see some of our staff back there wearing the DWS shirts. They did a lot with this project. We have 22 full-time employees, and every one of them did something related to this project. We had a lot of our maintenance crew. We're going to show you pictures. This was totally different 2 years ago. We're pouring concrete. They installed the equipment. Our operators had to keep this plant operating because you can't just shut down the wastewater plant to make changes. So we kept this plant running while this was being done. We wouldn't be here to celebrate UV if it wasn't for that crew back there, because their skill made this happen. I want to thank you all for what you did. Last, I guess I got a couple more. I want to thank all the contractors. We've got a handout right here. There was a number of contractors that we hired to help with some of the aspects of this that we couldn't do in-house. And then last, people might not realize, but the Bay County Department of Water and Sewer is under the Road Commission. Commissioner Schumacher is here today. They were supportive of this project from day one as well. So I want to thank the Road Commission for their support in helping us get this project to completion. With that, I want to introduce Alan Cardinal. He is our wastewater plant superintendent, and he's going to show you some pictures of the project. Alan?
I'd like to thank you all for coming today. This was truly an exciting product for us to be able to undertake. I appreciate the effort that everyone put into it. I'm going to show a very short slideshow, but it'll show some of the pictures. This is very broad strokes. There were a million little things that had to happen with this project. All right, so just a little background. This is a picture of the wastewater treatment plant a couple years after it came online in 1980. As Ryan mentioned, chlorine was used for disinfection from the beginning. That was the method of disinfection back then. There weren't a whole lot of other options at the time. But it was, even though chlorine is a dangerous chemical, it was relatively safe. We had process safety management that we had to do through the state. Through EPA, we had an emergency response plan that we had to work on. So there were things in place to keep chlorine as safe as possible. This is the plant again in 2023 before we started the UV project. Right back here is where our existing chlorine contact chambers. It was a 6.3 million gallon facility. We serve about 36,000 people in 9 Mid-Michigan communities. And we were still using chlorine almost 45 years later. And by this time, there were several better alternatives available. And with the rising price of chlorine, we had to start looking at them. For a little background, we used to keep up to 8 2-ton chlorine cylinders on site. And that's a heck of a lot of chlorine. Not only is it a potential danger to the employees here, if it ever got out, it could be a danger to the community. And so that was something we began to consider as we looked at what we were going to do. We also stored 800 gallons of sodium bisulfite. Sodium bisulfite isn't as dangerous as chlorine, but it's still a chemical that we had to pay for to use, and that again was a potential harm to our employees. And again, chlorine prices had risen by over 400% since 2019. So in the midst of those price increases, we started looking at other options. Preparation really began in 2021 when we conducted a feasibility study prepared by Fleece and Vandenbrink Engineering. We needed to know if UV would work at this facility. If your water's too cloudy, for example, UV won't be able to penetrate and inactivate the pathogens like it's needed. Happily, the feasibility study concluded that we could introduce UV disinfection at this facility. The design engineering was completed by Tetra Tech. They won the bid for the design engineering. That was completed in 2023. Originally, you can see this design. This was supposed to be a pre-engineered metal building to save money. Ultimately, the bids came in on that, and it wasn't going to save us money. And so we went back to the drawing board, and actually Spicer Group designed the building that we're in right now. They based it on the design of our other buildings at the wastewater treatment plant. And unless you look real close and can see that the siding is a slightly different color, you wouldn't know that this building hadn't been here as long as the rest of them. We started project construction in 2024 in the summer. This was the chlorine contact chamber. We had a south chamber and a north chamber. We had to keep feeding chlorine while we worked on this project. We couldn't shut the plant down while we did it, so we had to keep feeding chlorine. So we fed chlorine out of the north chamber while we took the south down and began working on it. And you can actually see in this picture there was some areas where concrete cutting specialists had already begun removing some of the walls that were no longer needed for the retrofit. So yes, concrete cutting specialists cut out existing walls and that needed to be removed. Our staff, wastewater staff, set forms for new UV channels, and they poured new walls. There's a couple, again, this was more than a one-day process. This is weeks and weeks and weeks of putting up forms, pouring walls, pulling them down, so getting the next one set up. It was quite an endeavor. They did, as Ryan said, they did a fantastic job. But again, this is weeks worth of work in 2 pictures. Here in the middle of summer, in the hottest part of summer, our employees doing this. Our staff also brought dual 225 amp power feeds from the aeration building, which is about 450 feet in that direction. That was our staff. We can see a couple of our staff members here at the aeration building getting that set. Our water distribution crew, who shares the property with us, they're the ones that dug the trench for the power feed so that we could get those to this building. The unused parts of the existing chambers had to be filled with sand and compacted. So again, that was our staff filling and compacting the sand. In fact, our staff hauled about 1,300 tons of sand to this property to get all of it filled and compacted. And then our plant staff also oversaw the pouring of the cement slab over the old chlorine contact chamber. So this was originally a mirror image of this. By the time we were done, we now have our two UV disinfection channels. So the next step was to begin installing equipment and begin constructing the building. The equipment itself is a Trojan UV Signa system. We chose that for this installation. It had a competitive price. We looked at 3 different options. Their price was competitive with everybody else's. They had a reputation for quality. There are a lot of installations of this particular equipment in Michigan, and it could be retrofitted into our existing structures. So we didn't need to build a whole new building or whole new channels. We could retrofit it into our structure. At that point, we began construction of the building itself. Bill's Custom Fab erected the steel structure, and Thomas Brown and Son Roofing from here in Bay City completed the roof. The UV equipment was installed by wastewater division staff, including both power and hydraulic lines. And after the presentation here, you'll be able to actually go take a look at that equipment. The UV equipment was started up before the building was complete. We had the roof on, but no walls. The startup and training was conducted in December of 2024. This is actually a picture of the evening that we started it up. And then on 12/11, we started up and the chlorine system was permanently shut down. We never used chlorine again, although we did hang on to it for a while just in case. But the UV worked well. We had no problems. And this is actually a picture of the truck taking chlorine out of this plant for the very last time, never to return. At this point, the project paused for, during the winter. We actually decided that our staff had been taxed quite a bit. There was other projects we needed them to work on, and so we bid out the completion of this project. And Serenus Johnson won the bid to complete the building. They filled and compacted the remaining contact chamber with sand, as we had done on the other side. Serenus Johnson was also the ones that attached the siding panels. You can see a picture of them doing that here. They poured the sidewalks around the building as part of it. And again, they did a lot more than this. This is just the broad strokes. And then also this ramp out front here for the garage door, they poured the footings and built the ramp as well. Wastewater employees performed all the electrical work in this building, so all the conduit, the structures here and everything was performed by our staff, our electricians. A&B plumbing and heating and wastewater employees did the plumbing in the building. You can see the large roof drains and a lot of the hose bibs and stuff like that were done by A&B. A lot of the smaller stuff was done by our staff here. The overhead door was installed by M&R Garage Doors. Shaw Contracting excavated new storm sewer and worked on the surrounding grounds. Again, among other things, there was a large excavation that had to take place between this building and the next one, and Shaw took care of that as well for us. So the UV project was finally completed in September of this year. We worked on it all summer and for part of the fall. The total cost of the entire project was about $2 million. We say that with some pride. I think if we would have just paid somebody to do all this without our staff doing it and oversee everything, it probably would have been more like a $4 million project. But we were able to realize substantial savings by doing a lot of the work ourselves. Again, here's the plant now with our UV building. As Ryan said, thank you to the Bay County Board of Road Commissioners. From the moment we started looking at doing this project, the Board of Commissioners supported us fully, and we were able to get this project done. We'd like to thank all the firms that worked on the project. I mentioned a lot of the contractors we had working on it. They did a fantastic job. We never had a problem with them. And as well as some of the places that we bought our equipment, We bought a lot of the forms and rented forms from Himco. Sequin supplied a lot of the lumber and building supplies. Medler and Standard Electric supplied a lot of the equipment that we used here. It was just a lot of local companies working with our staff to get this structure built. And finally, we want to thank all the wastewater employees whose efforts made this project possible. Our maintenance staff, I don't think there's a single maintenance staff that we had that didn't touch some part of this building. Our operations staff has to run the plant while there's a large operation going on, and that is not an easy thing. They were involved in several stages of it as well. Again, a big shout out to our staff. They did a fantastic job with this project. And I'd also like to particularly thank our project manager, Tim Fitzgerald. I don't think there's another single person here at Wastewater who did more to make the project happen than Tim.
Hi, I'm Ryan Goebel. I'm the director here at the Bay County Department of Water and Sewer. This is our wastewater plant. I'm very happy to show off our new UV system. This was installed in December of 2024. It took a while to finish the project. That wasn't finished until September 2025. UV disinfection has taken the place of chlorine gas. We started talking about making this change in 2021. It took the last few years to implement it. Putting UV in and replacing chlorine has made this plant a lot safer, and it's a lot safer for our community. We used to bring in chlorine gas to disinfect our wastewater in ton cylinders. We could have as many as 8 one-ton chlorine cylinders here at any given time. If there would have been a release from those cylinders, it could have been catastrophic to our community and our employees. Now, for disinfection, we have this channel behind us. When our wastewater has been clarified and it's ready to be discharged to the river, it runs over the UV lights, and that's it for disinfection. It's a lot simpler and safer for our community.